Welcome to the Passing Time with Craig podcast. As always, I'm your host, Craig. Today is the start of a new kind of series that we're going to do occasionally, and I'm very excited to have this guest on. We first met at Trivia Tuesday, I think.
Yep.
We're both fans and guests of a wonderful Tuck and Rolls podcast.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Occasionally they come back and do stuff. You know her, MVZ. Good old Zareen.
Yep.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
This is the first of probably multiple ones. We can go on a lot of different ones, but we are today reviewing To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar.
A classic.
A classic. So we're talking these queer films. This is 1995 is when it came out. It was directed by Beeman Kidron and written by Douglas Carter Bean, who I definitely did my background check on, and he was a gay male. So
okay, that's one check.
Yeah, I was definitely a little worried, but I was learning about all this stuff. So Robin Williams makes a cameo in the movie. Spielberg was read the script to him on a plane by Robin Williams.
Oh.
And he loved it so much that he told the director Beeman, because Beeman was apparently 9 months pregnant while shooting this film. And Spielberg was like, if you go into labor, I will direct this film.
Interesting.
So Spielberg was on board with this.
Didn't know that.
But we have Patrick Swayze, Wesley Snipes, and John Leguizamo as three drag queens. And then, of course, there's some people they encounter, including a cop played by Chris Penn, Sean Penn's brother. And then they meet the small town that includes Stalker Channing, Blythe Danner, Beth Grant, and a host of other characters and actors you may have recognized in all these films. But when was the last time you watched this movie before you rewatched it for this podcast?
Oh gosh. This is one of my favorite, queer cult classic movies. It came out, like you said, in 95, and at that time, I didn't watch it at that time. I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
Around then, 9 or 10. So I watched it as a young teen for sure. That was probably my first encounter with queer culture on the big screen.
Yeah.
But the last time I watched it before this pod, it's got to be 5-6 years ago.
So it's been a while, and a lot has happened in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, RuPaul's Drag Race started, 2008?
50 years ago.
Yeah. It seems like a long time ago. So, drag queens have really become even bigger part of the culture. And we're going to discuss everything about what aged, what didn't age well, the performances, could this be made today? But rewatching this for the first time in 5-6 years, what were your first thoughts?
Well, because it holds a little special place in my heart, I tried not to beat it up too much, but there's certainly a lot that doesn't hold up about this movie. But first thoughts, there were some, I don't really remember Robin Williams being in this.
John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt?
Yeah, that was a small cameo, but I was like, oh yeah, I guess he was in this. And Blythe Danner, I completely forgot was in this.
And Blythe Danner is the most ridiculous character, and I loved her. Just that first scene where she's just telling the drag queens all the gossip.
Yeah, she was the town gossip, and I like that. But I noticed one thing that I hadn't watched or noticed on previous rewatches was the low-key microaggression racism.
Yes.
So when she's explaining the town folks to Noxzema, she's like, oh, what did she say about the cafe guy? She's like, oh, he's the nicest black man you're ever gonna want to know. I'm like, why you gotta say it like that?
And
colored man.
Yes, colored man, and that's even weirder.
This was 95. We didn't say that then.
No. And what was interesting to me, and something I was thinking about when I was watching it this time, was I thought it was very interesting and kind of, added to it, or I like that it wasn't three white leads. It was very interesting, especially because it takes, the big part of it is in the small town. But you have a Hispanic, a black person, and a white male. You have three different races.
Yeah.
And then you could add in these little thoughts and theories and everything.
Yeah, you're right. And for the time, that, I think, first being a movie about drag queens in 95, around, I want to say around the end, not the end, but the height of the AIDS epidemic was kind of on its way down. Yeah. And it was a movie about three drag queens And you're right, it wasn't just 3 white drag queens. But I do feel the story did focus on Vita's, the white characters' problems.
It very much was.
The timeline or the trajectory of their story more than anyone else.
Yeah. And like Wesley Snipes' character is very much just that that helping saving black person
for sure, like
cliche,
and like the catty quippy one.
Yes.
And Vita was like the motherly saint kind of thing. So
I will say
that didn't hold up for me.
I have to say though, I think rewatching it today, I think this is one of Wesley Snipes' if not best performances.
It's one of my favorites.
I genuinely laughed out loud several moments in that movie because of lines that Wesley said when he goes, "You're not gonna start walking on water, are you?"
It's a Miss Clara.
Yeah, Miss Clara. And I can also when Blythe Danner is describing Clara and without saying really offensive terms, but kind of was leading into it, and we knew what she was getting at. I was like, oh god.
Yeah, the town gossip was a bit problematic, but no, you're right. Noxzema, she has so many famous one-liners, even used today in the drag zeitgeist. If you watch Drag Race, they're still quoting her all the time. I still find myself saying, if I introduce myself, oh, Zareen Omar, Jesse's daughter. I love that line.
Yeah.
And little Latin boy in drag, why are you crying?
Yeah.
I know that still gets, if you know, you know, kind of thing. That's a good quote.
So, okay. We're not going to go this scene by scene, but let's kind of start at the beginning. Because what was interesting to me and something I've forgotten, the only time we don't see Wesley and Patrick in drag is the opening credits. And that is just those brief moments, and then they're getting into drag.
Yeah.
And I felt that was very interesting that this is how we're starting off with the montage. And it wasn't anything too kooky or making fun of. It was just these two people getting ready.
Yeah.
And then we jump into what they're getting ready for, this whole drag show and a competition. Mm-hmm. And my first thought was, because we see RuPaul, and we also see a bunch of other well-known drag queens, especially for 95, ones that stood the test of time. Do you think that was the filmmakers getting them on board to be like, hey, actual drag queens are in here, so we're not making fun of them?
I mean, it could be. I feel like if they weren't consulting with, especially because this movie takes place or it starts in New York, if they're not consulting with New York drag queens in the 90s, don't bother making this movie.
Yeah.
So I think, having RuPaul in there for sure during her height or that was super important. Let's talk about their entrance to the movie, their introduction in the movie, descending from the rafters,
oh my goodness,
in a Confederate flag as Rachel Tension. It's probably one of the most iconic drag moments.
I forgot the descent, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, that was pretty key. But yeah, I think to answer your question, I think it was intentional that they included those folks, and they had to. Otherwise, I don't think it would be the cult classic it is.
Yeah, and we have to acknowledge, and I think we need to talk about this right away. There's a scene in the car where they're discussing the different, and this is again 1995, but what the almost 3 categories were for queer. Mm-hmm. I would say specifically for that time frame, they're talking queer men.
Yeah. And
what's interesting about this movie too, and you have to go in and realize that there's a different campiness to it, but also some magic to it. Like when they decorate their hotel room or their suite there, and does the little click of the eyes and the flashlight or the lamp turns on, and
the bewitched little
and then they just throw it on the wall and it just magically appears there. Yeah. So there's some magic to it, but drag queens generally do not just spend all their time in drag.
Yeah. That's kind of, I think, one of the disappointments watching it today is it really painted this image of drag queens in the 90s as you know, one note, one dimensional. They're this magical queer that is only this one thing that's specifically in the context of the movie. They come to this town to just kind of like bring positivity and self-acceptance and like feminism. And it's like, no, drag queens and queer people have, you know, other dimensions to them, and they just felt very one note.
Yeah.
Specifically, they had no like sexual agency or anything, no gayness, no queerness to them at all.
And we're seeing that with like RuPaul's Drag Race now, where there are like cisgender women competing or straight males. Like drag is, we've realized that drag is just all encompassing.
Yeah.
Anyone can be a part of it, but that's not what they're doing. And there's a point where Wesley, they're in the car and they talk about, and they use terms transvestite and transsexual or drag queen. Like those are the three things.
Yeah,
so
those are the only three things.
Those are the only thing. And the transvestite, I believe, were the straight men who dresses.
I don't remember the quote exactly.
And then the transsexual is a transgender person, is what we would call now.
The transvestite was a straight man who dress up in women for kicks.
Yes.
Dress up like women for
yes.
kicks.
And then the transsexual is what most people call transgender now.
Yeah.
That was the 90s. There's so many times you watch 90s movies and they use the term transsexual.
It was jarring to hear the term transvestite. I'm like, I haven't heard that in so long.
I know. I forgot about it. And I was like, and then we go right into transsexual, and then we do drag queen and try to explain the difference. But again, I was like...
And they say, Noxzema said a drag queen is when a man that has too much fashion sense for one gender dresses up like a woman, they are a drag queen.
Yeah. So I think of all the scenes, that is one that has definitely not aged well.
Yeah, I agree. And that was the scene.
I think we're only like 10, 15 minutes into the movie at this point, too.
Yeah, that was on their way. They just left New York. And by the way, choosing a convertible as your mode of transportation to drive from New York to LA is insane, especially if you're going to be in drag 24/7 with a beat face and those wigs.
Exactly.
Why are you
They're
riding
all
in a convertible?
wearing wigs. That's what I don't get. Like, I know your hair won't get too messed up, but like, how is that thing staying on?
I know. Yeah, weird choice. I forgot what your question was. Yeah.
I would say like that is probably the scene that has not aged well.
Yeah, that was like a really fast and loose way of trying to explain, because Chi-Chi, they were trying to, you know, make Chi-Chi feel a bit better about herself and her drag, which I also forgot how rude Chi-Chi was.
Yes.
Throughout watching the movie, I'm like, I would not have brought her along. I would have kicked her out a long time ago. She's very rude to everyone.
Apparently, John Leguizamo likes to improvise. And Patrick Swayze almost punched him in the face at one point because he got really annoyed with it. Patrick Swayze is not an improviser, is what we've discovered.
Interesting. Okay. I could see that, actually.
Yeah.
If their rudeness was improvised, then I'd punch them too.
Yeah. And then we also have the scene as they're driving that they go through the hometown and stop in front of the house. And the mom comes out. I don't know if she thought she heard something or saw something, but she just happened to come out and then like turned away. So we're seeing, and I think the scene, what I liked about it was that it, because it seemed at that point that everything was going really smoothly for these characters and everything was really fun and positive and like, let's face it, 95, I mean, for 2024, we haven't changed much 19 years later, but it seemed like they lived in this happy-go-lucky, beautiful world. But now we got to see that they've had some struggles. Yeah.
I feel like that scene was put in to give, it was just all exposition without very much like any dialogue. And again, this is what I said, like they focused mainly on like the white drag character's background and history and struggles, and like even that wasn't that much, but you're just meant to, that scene was meant to imply like they left their hometown because they weren't accepted for who they were, and they went and found their family and their people in New York City where they were accepted for being who they were.
Yeah.
And that was all we got from that.
And you bring up a good point too, and you mentioned it earlier. It is very much, I would say, it's not it is an ensemble movie, and these are the three main characters, but it is very much Patrick is leading this story. And then John Leguizamo's character learns some things and is learning things. And then Wesley Snipes, like, are one of only, like, two people of color in the movie, like, black people.
And it's just pointed out, these are the black people in this movie. I'm
like, they're there to just make, and again, I think hilarious jokes.
100%.
Fantastic. One of Wesley Snipes' best performances, but they don't have an evolution in the movie.
No, they have no, like, again, this is, watching it now, I just felt like these three characters were presented as, like, caricatures of drag.
Yes.
It's like these, you know, fairy godmothers that are all positive and all good. Like, they have no nuance to them. They have no, like, again, no sexual agency. There's no, like, queerness about them.
Yeah.
Other than they're just men who dress up like women and stay in drag 24/7, which I don't know any drag queen that
No,
does.
they don't. You even have, like, the world's most famous RuPaul.
Yeah.
Is sometimes not in drag and, like, makes appearances on talk shows or game shows, not in drag. Like, that was just so interesting to me, and I totally forgot that there was, like, no moments of them not being in drag
Except that opening scene. Yeah.
and
right.
and they have dialogue as they're going along, before they get to the small town where, you know, checking into hotels, they're worried and so they probably wouldn't be dressed in drag knowing that they would have to go check into places. And then they get pulled over by the cop. My license says Eugene.
Yeah. And I thought that scene was interesting when they checked into their first hotel and, you know, Noxzema and Vita are like, no, this isn't going to be safe for us. We kind of know, we've been around this block. Let's not do this.
Yeah.
And Chi-Chi's like, no, you got to live your life. And she just went for it. I'm like, that doesn't feel realistic to me. Not that we need to see the violence of like against queer and drag queens on screen, but it didn't feel realistic. I'm like, you should have some concern about going to a hotel in a place you've never been to in full drag.
And then we have kind of an offensive joke. The manager thinks that they're female basketball players.
The full lesbian basketball team. I forgot about that scene, honestly. That's what caught my eye this time around. I was like, I don't remember this at all.
Yeah. That was I forgot about it, and I was like, this seems weird, and, like, just, now we're just making, like, we're trying to do a good job of showcasing these characters, but we're gonna make fun of female basketball players and say that you look like men or you're butchy and whatever. No,
you're right. I feel like it's kind of tough because this movie was important for queer representation in a lot of ways, but it does such a bad job of queer representation because everybody's a stereotype. Yeah. Everybody is like a cliche.
And it's even just all the other characters in this movie. Like, everything's a cliche. Yeah. Like, you got these small town folks and they've all got these little cliches, or they've all got issues. Like, I don't understand why the shop owner had to have a stutter.
I don't know.
Like,
that seemed random.
And then Clara is a mute. Nobody can understand, but
that was one of my favorite relationships.
I love that, but it made no sense.
Yeah, I remember loving Noxzema and Clara's relationships the first time I saw the movie, and seeing it again recently, I was like, yeah, that's a really cute. It's a bit like, this whole movie takes place in like 3 days, by the way, but their relationship was very cute progression from when they first got there to the end. So yeah, I don't understand like the cliches in the small town. What I noticed this time around watching as well is like what the movie had to say about feminism. It's like, all you need is like a makeover and step into your power. And I'm like, that is not at all like an accurate representation of what feminism should be.
Because that's what they do with Bobby Lee. And, you know, Bobby Ray then discovers, oh, you're beautiful. One of the other things I realized with this movie, I didn't realize that there were 2 scenes that were gonna be rape.
You know what?
And one of them was gonna be a gang rape.
Yeah, you're right. The gang rape scene, I remember it happening, but I was watching it very uncomfortably.
Yeah.
Like yesterday when I watched this, I was like, I remember seeing this, but this is like kind of violent. And the sexual assault scene with the cop and Vita, I remember watching, it was a big part of the movie,
Yeah.
but even still, it was very uncomfortable to see even 30 years later. I was like, wow, this was pretty fucked up.
Yeah, it was really messed up. And at least the cop did not have a redemption.
No.
But
Sheriff Dullard had very big January 6th energy.
Yeah.
Like
yes.
The way he storms into the
God. Yes.
Like he's when he was storming into the town at the end, I'm like, oh, this is probably how it went down.
That is, oh my, that is the best description of it. And I also, okay, let me ask you about the scene. We are just jumping all over the place, but let me ask you about the scene where he's in the bar and he just keeps saying stuff, and like there's almost this hint that maybe he's gay and into it. Like it just seems really weird, and I'm happy that they didn't go down that road, that it turned out that he was gay, because like they usually redeem them at that point because they're like, oh no, you're suppressing your sexuality. But that was a weird scene.
It was a weird scene. And I'm not sure, I think the only point of that scene was to connect him and I can't remember the husband's name.
Virgil.
Yeah, because obviously he had the shoe and he's like, oh, I know whose shoe this is.
Yeah.
But you're right, that whole like exposition about, you know, the way he described Vita and the way he described, you know, what he deemed to be sickening about men loving men.
Yeah.
They were implying he's gay.
Yeah.
Like that was the message. But
because then
right.
then you get a scent of that musky.
Their stubble brushing up against each other.
Your hand going like through the chest here, like
twirling through the chest
yeah.
hair. Yeah, like they were implying he's gay. And you're right. I'm glad they didn't go all the way, because then the way the movie is by nature, I feel like they would have been like, oh, we forgive him for sexually assaulting Vita because he just was struggling with his own demons. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Whereas like we seem to just forgive Michael Vartan and the other country boys because Noxema was like, this is how you know, talk to a girl.
And that was another thing. I'm like, this is what they're presenting as like, this is what feminism is. Like, you should just, you know, speak to women nicely. Yeah. And that's how you respect women. And that's what makes them feel good. And I'm like, this is a weird message.
And it is weird. It's very weird. And again, it's also, and clearly by the conversation that we had in the car that we discussed earlier with Wesley Snipes, these are at least Wesley's, like Noxema identifies as a he, him. It was just a drag queen. So we still in the end have him like mansplaining.
Yeah, you're right, actually.
How to treat a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
Let's talk about Stockard Channing's character.
Yeah.
Because, again, there's a lot that happens in this movie, and they really touch on a lot of things. And now we've got domestic violence in the mix.
Yeah, I remember that scene from the first time I watched the movie, and you know, I'm not sure. Like, you can cut this part out because I don't know what your question is.
What do you think of that character? Does it work? Does it not? Like, is it just a stretch and just having a point where a drag queen can punch a man? Like,
Stockard Channing's character obviously just played a role in, again, Vita coming in and being the savior queen, the nice drag queen with, you know, I think in the end, again, I go back to that point of like how they describe what feminism is. Like, all she does in the end is stand up for Vita and stand up to her husband. And her husband's like, oh, okay, guess I can't mess with you anymore. I'm like, I don't think that's how domestic violence ends. No. Like, it never usually ends so wrapped up so nicely, so peacefully.
Especially in a small town where Stockard Channing's not leaving with him at the
This is supposed to
end.
be a small, conservative, country bumpkin,
Yeah.
Midwest town. And I'm like, I don't want to, apply any tropes or stereotypes to these type of people, the types of people that live there, but that was an unrealistic portrayal of domestic violence and the outcomes when you stand up for or not stand up for yourself, but you try to leave or you try to end.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah. It's. Sometimes I think the biggest problem some movies have is just trying to tackle too many things at once.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he could just be an asshole. But like the fact that he actually beat her.
Yeah.
Like there's no saving grace from that. Because like he's not.
Was he supposed to be portrayed as like good in the end? I didn't catch that.
I don't think so. But at the same time, he's not leaving that town. Like
I thought he left. I thought that was like the end scene.
But like
she lifts the veil.
Yeah.
She stands up to him.
Okay,
he's
the
like, I can't mess with her
Spartacus.
anymore.
We got to talk about. We'll talk about the Spartacus scene at the end. But yeah, I don't know. Like they were just trying to give all these characters in the small town things that the drag queens can help them.
Yeah.
Like we talk about Beth Grant, who is a great character actress. Mindy Project. She was on Speed.
I didn't clock her until I watched it this week. I was like, oh, that's Beth Grant.
That's Beth Grant.
Yeah.
She's in. I mean, that's just it. If we rewatch, we could go through a whole series
She's
of
the cat in Dollface.
Yeah, we can rewatch everything in the '90s, and we will find her in it.
100%.
But Blythe Danner explains that she's an alcoholic. Nothing gets solved by that.
No,
except for the fashion.
This is what I'm saying. Like, the drag queens come in as this. Again, this takes place over like 3 days, 2 days. These magical queers that come in that have no like agency and no like identity other than just being, drag queens.
Yeah.
And they come in and make all these women feel comfortable and safe because they have no like sexual agency or anything like that, among other things. To just fix their problems.
Yeah.
And all it takes to fix their problems is a makeover. A day at the salon, a girl's day. And like they really like came into this town and just queer-eyed them. And they're like,
oh my God, that's what it is. That's what it is.
They really
queer-eye.
they really just like, karamoed them. They're like,
Yeah.
actually, they didn't even do that. They didn't even talk to them about their issues. Maybe Noxzema and Claire in an indirect way, but that's it. They just like, you need a makeover and your life will be better. And now you're a feminist and stand up to your men. I
will say this. This might be a hot take, but Noxzema did a lot more than Karamo often does in episodes.
You're right. I'm with you on that one. Karamo is... We don't need to get into Queer Eye because that's a whole...
that is a whole... We will actually... Okay, we're gonna have an episode where we talk about Queer Eye because we can dive right into that. We can also get into the drama and all that fun stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, like that's exactly what happened though. Is that they just came in, and I don't know. Is it supposed to be saying that queer people will help you and make you better? Like,
I think like the point. I don't want to say because I'm not the director. I'm not the people who wrote this movie, but I think the point they were trying to make is like drag queens are people. They're, our friends, our neighbors, whoever. They should be accepted for who they are, despite these things that you may not understand. And they kind of started with that message and ended with that message, but there was nothing in between. Like there was no nuance to these queens.
Yeah.
There was nothing like, I think of drag queens and I think of like, it's like a punk radical kind of not lifestyle, but like ideal. And there was nothing about that with them. And I think that was the way they're portrayed is like almost like it's safe to feel this way about these drag queens and let them like make you over and accept them because they're just, magical queers.
So I love talking about movies for so many reasons. And one of them is when I realized something that I didn't think about with a movie that I've watched a bunch of time. And chatting with you, it has now occurred to me that, yes, the main characters are these three drag queens. And this is their story. It is not their story. I've just realized this. The only character who has, only three of them who has some sort of evolution, and it's really basic and small, is Chi-Chi.
Chi-Chi.
The other two are just there to help people. The only thing Evita gets is hearing "I love you"
Yeah.
from Soccer Channing.
Yep.
This, and they said that's all I've ever wanted to hear with that name.
Yeah, this story was told to make straight white people. Sorry, but it's a Midwest.
It is 100%.
Straight white people feel good about queer, or I keep saying queer people, but drag queens.
Drag queens, yeah.
That's those are the main characters in this story. Like, these are just, the embodiment of drag, not the actual people behind it.
Yeah. Okay, so then we've got our Spartacus scene where you see.
I keep knocking and criticizing this movie, but I love it.
I love it too. But I think it's good to appreciate a movie when you can find its flaws as well.
I'm kind of surprised. I'm glad. Like, I'm pleasantly surprised that it still holds a place in my heart, even though I'm looking at it very critically now.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I still love it.
It is.
I still fuck with it.
I would still recommend it to people. Mm-hmm. But you have this Spartacus scene where you think Patrick Swayze is coming out because we don't see it, and then it's surprise, it's Stalker Channing in this like Lydia Dietz wedding dress.
Yeah, I love that.
And then everybody comes out and saying they're drag queens or drag kings, and then to like top it off, though, I'm like, oh, this is so nice, but then they're like, especially the men are like, oh yeah, hey gorgeous, and like do like weird, like overtly.
Overtly sexual, like the cafe dude, Jimmy Joe, rubbing his nipples.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
Their idea of what a drag queen is like, they really missed the mark. But again, this is not an accurate representation of drag queens.
No, it's not. What were some of your favorite, like, what's your favorite part of the movie? Like, is there a favorite scene or just like a joke or?
Oh gosh. Favorite part of the movie and favorite scene would have to be, I go back, I love Noxzema and Clara's relationship. I love the scene where, Clara's walking through the town and Noxzema's sitting on the porch and she drops something and she chases her. And then ends up sitting on the porch with her and having a one-sided conversation about the things she loves, and it happens to be the things Clara loves. Yeah. And I just love that connection they have and how she understood. Clara was so misunderstood by the townspeople. She didn't give a fuck, but she was so misunderstood by the townspeople, and Noxzema's just like, I'm gonna meet you where you're at and have just a cute conversation about the things I think you probably like. And I don't know, I loved their relationship.
Noxzema also, a line I don't think I'd ever noticed before, but I heard it this rewatch, and I was like, this movie's fucking brilliant just for this line alone, is when Noxzema and Clara have their goodbye. Clara gives stuff, and Clara's walk away. And I don't even think Noxzema's facing the camera, but you hear the line, and you just hear Noxzema say, I hope she leaves her record collection to me in her will.
That was cute. Yeah.
That's
what I mean. Like, they connected on, I don't even know, like, I don't know the references they were she was making when she was talking about movie stars, I assume, but they connected on that and their love of music, and she should leave her record collection.
Yeah, she should.
Other favorite moments are just like really funny one-liners. RuPaul ascending from the rafters, obviously.
Yes.
Rachel tension. What's Stalker Channing's character's name?
Oh.
It's completely
eluding me. I don't even.
Anyways, they get into the town. The three queens get into the town. And
Virgil. Ew. Angelic? No. Angelina? No.
It'll come to me, I think. The three queens come to town. Their car broke down. They need a place to stay. She's showing them around. She's like, okay, well, this is your room. She turns on the overhead light, and they're like, oh. They're like, that's real. Queers hate overhead light. We look terrible in the overhead lighting.
100%.
That holds up. Yeah. Oh, this was the first time I clocked this scene, and it made me laugh so hard. But Sheriff Dullard's clipboard of where queer find drag queens. Did you read the place?
Okay, so there was ballet.
There was ballet schools, and this was on a clipboard big sharp Sharpie writing bullet list. Flower shops. Ballet schools. Flight attendant lounges.
Yeah.
Restaurants for brunch. Not wrong. And antique stores, which if we queers love thrifting.
They do.
Not
they
wrong.
Do. Yeah.
But I just thought that was so funny that like that's what he came up with. Flower shops, ballet schools.
Yeah. It's a very interesting like, and again, because it's written by a gay man, so you're definitely like, okay, it's better because this is where we're going to start talking about this. The point of this series. Could this be made today?
I feel like there's been some rumblings of people wanting it to be made today. I don't think it should be made today. It could be made today.
If it gets made today, based off of what we saw in this movie from 1995, would this be 3 transgender women? Or would it still be drag queens?
No, I think it could be either, but I think it would be 3 drag queens.
Yeah.
Especially like, I mean, if you're picking casting, it's going to be 3 drag queens from RuPaul's, like prominent queens from RuPaul's Drag Race. Like, again, they've been through, I don't know how many seasons, 16 now?
Yeah.
Just the American version.
Yeah.
There's no shortage of drag queens to pick, so why wouldn't you cast real life drag queens?
Yes, because, okay, here we go. We've got, this is the first Hollywood mainstream film to feature drag queens.
This also came out around the time of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Yes, so Priscilla,
right? Okay.
Queen of the Desert, very similar. I don't know how much, like, I tried to look into it, and there's a lot of references to it, but it doesn't seem like they really gave it homage or, like, Americanized it.
Right.
It actually opened number 1 at the box office, surprisingly, the opening weekend.
To Wong Fu, or?
To Wong Fu.
Okay.
$4 million, which nowadays would be a huge bomb for number 1 opening, but 1995, different times. Also, I'm imagining this budget was not huge, so I think they easily made their money back. But we have Wesley Snipes, Patrick Swayze, John Leguizamo.
Huge actors at this time.
Major.
John Leguizamo was just coming off of Carlito's Way.
Wow.
Huge movie.
Oh my
and like
God.
very like in that his role in that movie, very masculine.
Yeah.
Patrick Swayze obviously came off of Dirty Dancing, Ghost, and Point Break. And Wesley Snipes, New Jack City, Jungle Fever, White Men Can Jump, Demolition Man.
Wow.
And then after this, John Leguizamo did Romeo and Juliet, which I could do a whole other podcast on if you ever want to talk about it.
Okay, maybe we need to do a Romeo and Juliet one because that would be
That's
interesting.
a queer-coded movie, but
yeah,
this like I'm not surprised it did really well opening weekend because just curiosity itself, like these huge, at the time, masculine Hollywood A-list actors doing drag queen roles. Like you'd just be curious, even if you knew nothing about that world.
I wonder how many people went to it thinking that it was going to be just making fun of queers and drag queens.
Yeah.
It would be interested if we could look back at that, and I'm sure there's no stats for it, but I'm sure there were people that were like, we're going to go make fun of these people, and like...
God, I mean, I hope not, but those people are out there, you're right.
Yeah. So if it made today, it should be a proper drag queens.
I think so. Like, if you want to... I think this is one of those movies that's, because it's a cult classic, it's untouchable. Like, we're not making Rocky Horror Picture Show.
No.
Nobody wants that because we know you just can't.
Yeah.
Same with this. I think there's probably been musings about remaking it, but I don't think it should be. But if, for whatever reason, they decided to, I think you should cast drag queens.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I would say... And this is one of the things that I love about streaming sites. I've really enjoyed when they've taken a movie from especially the 80s and 90s and made it into like a limited series. I think this could be really well to really get deeper into all these characters and focus more on the drag queens this time. And not make it just they're here to help everybody, but really get into their psyche. And maybe one of them... You know, we've had drag race contestants who have then transitioned. Like that happens as well. There are drag queens who transition. So it would be interesting if you have one of the characters who, like Chi-Chi, I feel, if this was made today, I think it would be important to see that maybe they're realizing that they are women.
Yeah, I could see that. And we do have shows like that, like Pose. I don't know if you've seen Pose, but that's essentially about the world of drag in the 80s and 90s, but it focuses on trans women in drag in New York ballroom culture. So, I think it could go either way. I like the idea of doing like a limited series with this.
I think there's so much you can do with this and make them be in the town longer than the 3
weekend.
days.
That's actually what surprised me this time around as well, because like I kind of just looked at everything that had happened. I'm like, this was only 2.5 days.
Yeah.
Like in my mind, that was like a week they spent in that town.
And it's also like it showcases the positive, where other than Virgil, the whole town comes to the rescue, as we talked about the Spartacus. But even the 4 boys who were gonna sexually assault, gang rape Chi-Chi.
I don't mean to laugh, but wow.
But like seriously, that was gonna happen. That was a scene. And they seem to just quickly move on from it.
Chi-Chi never said anything to the girls.
No.
And never really confronted those boys. And when they were like nice at the end, everyone was like, oh, see, that's how you be a feminist.
Yeah, I think if they're going to do it, I think it needs to be a limited series. And I think that they need to just update some things for sure. But I don't know. I think here we are 29 years later.
Gosh.
I know, right? That's like, whoa. 29 years later. I think is it still important? And is it important for queer culture, not just for movies history, as again, the first major Hollywood film focusing on drag queen, but as a queer film, is it important? Should the next generation be watching it?
I don't know. I mean, I think it is important. I feel like the fact that it's still talked about, like you said, almost 30 years later, it's still referenced in a lot of drag, at least the commercial drag we see.
Yeah.
It's still in the zeitgeist. It's still pointed to as one of the, like you said, the first widely accepted and wildly popular representations of queer culture and drag culture on the big screen. I think it has its value. There's a lot of good things. We can't just expect representation matters in many of its forms, and we can't just expect people in 1995 just knew exactly how to portray those things. I do feel like they knew better in a lot of ways. They could have made things better, but they were just kind of lazy and went with the tropes, and they went with the microaggressions about the racism stuff was weird to me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, when Sheriff, not to go back, but when Sheriff Dullard he came to, and the other cops were like, okay, we need to file this report, and we just want to make it clear you were beat up by a woman, and they were laughing at him, and he's like, I want to be clear, it wasn't 3 women, it was 3 boys, and one of them was black.
Yes.
And I was like, whoa, like, even for 95, like, why you gotta say it like that? Why you gotta say that?
I noticed that too. I found that whole scene very interesting.
It's very telling of the times.
It was very telling of the time. We're obviously talking about, Midwest, I think is what we're supposed to be. But it was very interesting to see everything about it. First of all, the fact that the first cop we see decides to sexually assault somebody they pull over.
Yeah.
And then he's out for 24 hours. Like, it's not until daylight that somebody wakes him up. I'm like, this guy's dead then.
Like, he's better be. And like, that was also interesting, not to detract from your point, but going back to the movie, the 3 queens left that cop thinking he was dead, and they never gave it another thought the rest of the movie. They're just like doing their thing in their town. I would be so stressed to be like, there's a dead cop that we likely killed. We need
Yeah.
to get the fuck out of here. We can't stay here. They never talk about it ever until he comes back all
But he's alive.
Yeah.
And you know what was interesting to me? And it was tough because I was thankful that they didn't kill, because I think that was a huge part. There's so many other movies we can talk about in this series, and how queers were represented as like evil. Mm-hmm. They would have killed a cop. Yes, the cop was sexually assaulting, but they would have killed it. But at the same time, I kind of wanted this, like, and I had watched the movie before, but this time when I was rewatching it, I was like, I kind of wanted to be a Thelma and Louise. I thought that would have been very interesting.
Yeah.
A Thelma and Louise drag queen story. I mean, they wouldn't stop at the town, and it would be a whole different thing. But
It's funny you say that because, like, that's if you're watching the movie for the first time, you would think that's the central conflict. They killed a cop, and they need to figure out, like, this trip to LA is not important anymore. They need to deal with whatever happened here. But it's not. They get to the town, and the central conflict is making this town of women feel comfortable and good about drag queens in their town and having them step into their power.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
And,
why?
like, what's interesting is that they never seem to talk about it. The only person that we know for sure knew the whole time was Stockard Channing.
Yeah.
When she mentions the Adam apple.
Yeah.
But nobody else seemed, like, so did they all know and they were just always cool with it, or
That's another weird thing. We're supposed
we kind of
to, like,
glossed over that.
Yeah, like we're supposed to suspend our disbelief about that. Is that okay? You're trying to paint this town as like this conservative, buttfuck nowhere Midwest. Like when I don't know, for folks that haven't seen it, like this town has maybe 40 people in it.
Yeah.
So it's really supposed to be this kind of backwards kind of place.
Yeah, I think there's like 10 buildings we see.
And every single person is either aware and accepts them.
Yeah.
No.
No.
That's not 1995
No.
Midwest America. That's not 2024 Midwest America. There's no way.
No.
There's no way.
Also, you'll love this. I mean, this makes me very happy. Something I did not know until today. I was rewatching it, and I was like, fuck, why do I know Virgil? I know him. He looks so familiar. It turns out, and I was like, how did I never know this? He's an asshole who abuses his wife, but he is also John Hammond's evil nephew in The Lost World Jurassic Park. The one who brings Ingen in and then like gets eaten by the T-Rex at the end.
What year is this?
So Lost World Jurassic Park was 97 and this was 95. So this is 2 years before. They look very different. I'm going to show you... I will post this on my Instagrams once this episode comes out so people can see it. But I'm going to show you him because he looks so different. Where is he? Arliss Howard is his name. So this is him in Wong Fu. So that's him, we got him there.
Okay.
And then 2 years later is The Lost World. And it's like kind of mind-blowing.
That's not him.
That is a 2-year difference. That is him.
Wow.
I know.
That's wild. How did you clock that?
I was like, why does he look so familiar? That is drag. That is 100%. I was like, why does he look so familiar? So then, going down the rabbit hole, and there we have it. Couple other things that are in this movie, people I wanted to talk about. So I mentioned Blythe Danner.
Yep.
Blythe Danner is like so much fun in almost everything she is. Have you seen Paul? Seth Rogen as the alien.
No, I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
You should watch it. It's great. But we have Robin Williams. This is John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt.
Cute cameo.
Also, did you realize that the person who said to Noxema, I wish I was as beautiful as you, was Naomi Campbell?
Yes. Yesterday was the first time I clocked that. I was like, oh shit, that's Naomi Campbell.
Yeah. I don't know. I kept trying to figure out who the first person is who talks to them because I feel like they're supposed to be famous.
I didn't know.
But I don't know them. People considered for roles in this movie Gary Oldman
As Vita?
as Vita, but came off of Bram Stoker's Dracula and didn't want to do a bunch of makeup again.
I can't see him. I can't picture it.
Mel Gibson.
Oh, hell no.
Right?
Hell no.
Hell no. And Viggo Mortensen, also for Vita.
I think Patrick Swayze is the best choice, but I could see Vigo, I guess.
People considered for other roles, and they were never clear. And I don't know at one point, like if Noxima and Chi-Chi were always supposed to be black and Hispanic, but other people considered for roles include Matt Dillon, who I can't see as any of them.
No.
Robert Downey Jr., Rob Lowe,
Wow.
and James Spader.
James Spader?
Yeah.
That's wild. Okay.
Yeah, that was
Terrible.
No, like I do think. Again, I like when queer people get queer roles, get the roles that there's should have. With that said, I don't think it always needs to be queer people. I am okay when a straight actor plays a queer role, but they're not doing a caricature. Mm-hmm. And I kind of worry about that sometimes. Like,
is there an example of that? I can't think of it.
You know who I think, and it's weird because the person who plays their partner is an openly gay man, but Cam from Modern Family, Eric Stone Street, is such a caricature of a gay man.
Yeah.
And it does really like bother me. But then Jesse Tyler Ferguson, who plays Mitchell, his partner, is openly gay.
Yeah.
And so he seems to not have a problem with it, whereas like Mitchell is not as much of a caricature as Eric Stone Street is. So that always kind of bothered me. I feel like there's a couple other people that I'm thinking of, but like if you're not playing a caricature, and I don't think any of them really, as much as again we've discovered that this movie's they're the top billing.
Yeah.
That's not their story, if you will.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody does a bad caricature, and I don't think they were being anything bad.
I don't think... maybe I disagree with you here. I don't think they were bad caricatures, but they were 100% caricatures in my mind. Like
I would say John Leguizamo, Chi-Chi.
Yeah. She's so rude. I just couldn't get over how much I disliked her character watching it yesterday. I was like, ugh, I would not be friends with you. But I do think all three of them played caricatures of drag. They played, the embodiment of the fantasy of drag.
Yes.
Again, so, but it wasn't bad. Like, they did a great job.
Yeah.
But, I would rather see today, if it were remade, even then in 95, there was no shortage of drag queens in New York. They could have had drag queens play those roles. And
it's also interesting, too, because this was before a lot of like 2000s and early 2000s, but one of the big things that gets talked about a lot is Tyler Perry as Medea, and you got Martin Lawrence as Big Mama, and there's always these like jokes about black men, like big black men being dressing up in drag and like don't be that way, and like making fun and like all that stuff. So to have Wesley Snipes way before everybody else, very interesting. And
Wesley, Wesley Snipes' character wasn't like this loud, abrasive black woman the way that Big Mama and Medea are kind of portrayed. They were quite feminine, I thought. Wesley Snipes' character was quite feminine in the way they dressed, in the way their mannerisms, the way they spoke. They're my favorite character in that movie.
Okay, that was my next question.
Yeah.
Who's your
100%.
favorite? Oh. Noxima made me laugh so freaking much.
Yeah.
And I just think it was great. And I think one of the keys to make it different than, Martin Lawrence and Big Mama is that there was no point where, and it's actually not just like black men in dresses, it's white men in dresses. They've all had that point where they would like do something and then like they'd be talking in like their female voice and be like, but don't you disrespect me. Like there was no point where they turned.
There was one point. when Vita was being sexually assaulted by the cop.
Oh yes, Vita was. Yes, that's right.
It was
I
very
forgot about
feminine,
that.
and then she's like, "Don't touch my dick."
Yeah.
That was the only time you see their masculinity.
Apparently, Patrick Swayze put a corn on the cob
Really?
in his underwear. So that look on Chris Penn's face.
Real confusion.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
Interesting. You found some pretty interesting facts about this movie.
Oh yeah. I like to dive in. I just find, and again, this is why I love talking about movies, and I'm so glad that you were willing to come on the podcast to talk about, because movies are just fun.
Oh yeah.
And again, whether we did talk about the flaws with this movie, but we were all like, we still recommend it.
Oh yeah. I would recommend it if you've never seen it.
Yeah.
And you're, you love going to drag shows and this and that, and you want to know the references because you're probably going to hear it at some point in your life. I would recommend watching this movie for sure.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's okay to love something, but be critical of it.
Yes.
Like, just because you can't have blind spots about the things you love.
No.
Right? So, I wanted to ask what did you have any favorite moments? But I first want to know what your favorite looks were. Because I know we both go to drag shows in Calgary here. We love, the pageantry of it all. We love our local queens. So who was your favorite? Who had your favorite look?
You know what? I really love, I think my favorite is Noxima's outfit at the strawberry, like at the end. I don't know.
The beautiful red wig, the strawberry blonde wig, the red dress.
The red dress. I think I really like that. Or, okay, it's probably just Noxima. Like, Noxima had the fun to it. Chi-Chi always had a weird, different look to it. And I do really like Chi-Chi's final look.
Yes.
When she wins the pageant.
Yeah.
Vita is like so elegant, and
she's the mother. She's,
yes. But Noxima had the best look. So Noxima, now I'm thinking of even more of them. Okay, so the Strawberry Festival, when they decide to have the little, what is it, the women's time together, and then the girls' day, and they go to the hairdresser. Very like chill, casual look for Noxima, and then when Noxima discovers like the fringe, and then the 2-piece. Yeah, I think Noxima freaking crushed it on looks. What are some of your, or do you have your favorite?
I think, my favorite, obviously Noxima. Her look, I don't even remember, there wasn't one specific scene. It was just like the day, maybe the second day they were in town. Yeah. But when she's wearing like the tight orange little t-shirt underneath and then like this patterned romper over top, very like 90s kind of multicolored pattern, and the cute little like train cap and her braids. I thought that was her best look. That's her most, when I think of that movie and I think of iconic looks, I think of that look for some reason. And it's like, it's not her most feminine look. I think it's her most like kind of, I like her casual, her being in her casual look, and it reminds me very much of the 90s. So that was my favorite look of hers.
I do have to say, and I was like, did Noxima have this outfit already, or does somebody? But just the scene where Noxima is playing basketball, I'm like, did Noxima have this basketball outfit already, or did somebody else like?
That trunk was full of fits for every occasion. You just know it.
Yeah,
that's a Cadillac trunk.
That is a Cadillac trunk. And of course, at the end, we see Julie Newmar finally appear. Yeah. Apparently, she was at a convention once and she got pretty drunk, and someone got her to autograph the VHS case, and she was like, who the fuck is Wong Fu, and why am I thankful? Whether that's true or not, that's an internet thing. I hope it's true.
Let's keep it as part of the culture of this movie.
Yes.
It's true.
All right, so out of 10.
I'm going to rate it high.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to. And I don't know who listens to this podcast. Hate me if you want, but I'm going to give it like an 8.
I was going to do an 8 as well. I think, again, there's stuff that didn't age well.
Yeah.
But like, not as much as you'd think.
There are way worse. Not that you should compare like levels of bad and being like, okay, well, this is worse, so therefore this is good. But it could have been a lot worse.
It could have been a lot worse. But it was fun.
Yes.
I laughed a lot.
I still laughed a lot.
Yeah. Like, and I've seen this movie quite a few times.
Yeah.
But I genuinely laughed out loud.
Yeah.
Cackled to myself. I had to pause at one point because I was laughing. I was like, wait, I missed what was just said. But yeah, I think it did well. Could it be released today exactly how it was? Probably not.
I don't think it should exactly how it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, and again, like, and it's interesting that even 95, we always have this conversation in the queer community. Not everybody's always supportive of every single letter in the queer alphabet. And I think that this is one where they weren't completely supportive. That car scene, again, we talked about with the transsexuals and transvestites and drag queen and what these all mean. I'm like, oh, God, no, that's not right. But that was 95.
Yeah. Yeah, like that's, again, not something you'd expect to hear on screen in 95. And even yesterday watching it was jarring to, like, again, hear the word transvestite. I was like, what?
Yeah. And anything else you want to bring up before I start bringing up my final questions here?
Oh, I've just got some fun questions for you.
Okay. Ooh, fun. Do some fun questions for me.
Okay, only one. You've answered most of my questions throughout. But of the three queens, I don't want to assume. Do you watch RuPaul's Drag Race?
I watch it occasionally. I don't watch it as much. You know what my biggest problem? I don't enjoy the, like, craftsmanship. So I don't watch a lot of this, but I do enjoy the, like the reveals and the lip sync battles. Like,
okay, so you're familiar with lip sync for your life?
Yes, yeah.
Noxzema, Vita, or Chi Chi? Who's winning lip sync for your life?
I would say, and this may just become a podcast about how much we love Noxzema, but I think Noxzema will crush it.
That's interesting. I love Noxzema. I'm a Noxzema stan. I think Chi Chi's taking it.
Okay,
Chi-Chi's got something to prove.
Chi-Chi's got something to prove. I think Vita's not.
Vita's done. She's sashaying away. She's
done. I can even, like, picture some lip sync battles I've seen where I'm like, you're not doing anything.
No.
And that is Vita. And I think, unfortunately, like, sorry, you're not.
She's not in this conversation at all.
And even if it was actual, like, if this was Patrick Swayze's, like, drag performance, like, you've got all this, like, Dirty Dancing background, like, do it. But I still think that
I think it's definitely between Noxzema and Chi Chi, but I'm giving it to Chi Chi.
Chi Chi.
Yeah,
good.
She can pull it off.
Yeah. Okay, I've got 2 more questions for you before we wrap up here.
Okay.
Number 1, what do you think we should watch next in this series?
We're talking about just, like,
queer films. I would say before let's say 2014, because it's 10 years ago. Anything before that.
Okay, well, I have the memory of a goldfish, so this is putting me on the spot. But queer films before 2014 that are worth rewatching to see if they hold up. I mean, we kind of touched on Priscilla. I'm curious. They came out around the same time.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that one. I don't think I've ever seen it, if I'm being honest.
I don't know if I've ever seen it.
Yeah, so I would put that on my list next. I kind of want to Google queer films before 2014.
Okay, then I say we do Priscilla next.
Okay.
And the other one that I think we should do is Brokeback Mountain.
I watched that recently. I watched that on the plane.
What an interesting plane choice. Okay.
My options, I wasn't happy with them. And I was like on my third movie. So I'm like, why not?
And sometimes when I'm on the plane too, I'm like, am I going to fall asleep? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm not putting on something that I want to see.
Exactly that. I was like, I'm going to put on something I've seen already that I know I like.
Yeah.
Yeah, my other options were whatever. And I'm like, Brokeback. So, but I'd be happy to come back on and talk about that one.
Okay.
Yep.
And my final question I like to ask everybody, what's awesome?
What's awesome? The drag queens in Calgary. I know you just had Kevin on recently. Miss Anxiety. Love her.
Anxiety is the best.
Yeah. I will just echo what they said. I know you asked them that, but what's awesome in Calgary is the queer culture, the drag culture. I think it doesn't get enough recognition, and it's I don't think it flies under the radar, but I think
It's just not in
it
like
could get more love.
yeah.
Especially now.
Where are your some of your favorite places to go to watch drag?
Old B, The Attic,
Yeah.
Rising Tides, all the places that have already been mentioned.
Yeah.
I'm open to knowing or checking out some new spaces if you know.
Yeah.
Do you know any? Like, where do you go?
Those are the main ones. Dickens, of course. And there's always Twisted. That goes without saying. But I think there needs to be some more places that are just doing it. Like, people are trying to find reasons to go out.
Yep.
Businesses are trying to find reason as, money's getting tight.
Mm-hmm.
Put on a drag show. They're super fun.
Yeah. Brings out a big crowd.
Yeah. Okay, wait, I have one more question for you because I just thought of it. What would be your lip sync battle song?
Oh my God. That's tough. Oh, you're putting me on the spot. It'd have to be like pretty queer.
Yeah.
So Cher, I know some Cher songs. I would lip sync to that. Anything off Renaissance. Give me Heated. I'll sing Heated.
Would you do Texas Hold'em?
I don't love that song.
No. Oh.
I actually am I love 16 Carriages.
Yeah.
Texas Hold'em, it's okay. Like, musically, it's well done, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a musician, so I'm not going to speak to the craftsmanship of that song. But I've listened to it a couple times, and it's just not for me, and that's okay. It's a little too... And I like country, but it's not my kind of country.
That's fair.
But 16 Carriages, not a karaoke song, but if you haven't listened to it, please give it some love, because it's one of Beyonce's best songs in my opinion.
All right, I need to listen. I haven't listened to that one yet, so I need to listen to it.
It's wonderful.
Well, I'm so happy you came on today. This was super fun.
Yeah,
I knew it would be. You also beat Tuck and Rolls to my podcast.
It's not hard. But yeah, thank you for having me. This is
As
really
soon
fun.
as Ryan hears that, he's gonna message.
Right, it's not Ryan's fault. We all
It's
know.
not.
We all know who's holding up
We
this
know
podcast.
whose fault it is. But Zareen, it's great. It's just so fun that you and I finally got to do a podcast together.
Yes.
And I look forward to Priscilla, Queen of the Night, because I've never seen it.
Yeah, I am excited to kind of give it a first look and maybe go through it in the same way and give it that critical eye.
Yeah.
As, then versus now kind of thing.
All right. Well, you've heard our take on To Wong Fu. Thanks for everything, Julie Newmar. If you haven't seen it, we both agree you should check it out. If you haven't seen it for a while, check it out and give us your thoughts on it once you do. But thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Craig.
Thanks for passing time with me, and thank you all for passing time with me. We'll chat soon.